Hey, good afternoon. So this video is in regards to the observation that I did yesterday morning in Mrs. Thornburg's transitional kindergarten class from 9 in the morning until 10:30. Mrs. Thornburg's transitional kindergarten class is a preschool class for students that are in the Mount Vernon School District. It's at Little Mountain Elementary. So the one thing I didn't ask that I wish I would have asked is how long Mrs. Thornburg had been teaching and for how long at this level. In addition to Mrs. Thornburg was a paraeducator named Mrs. West, who was there to support Mrs. Thornburg and the students and their families. So upon arrival, and just an FYI, I wrote this out, but it ended up being 4 pages, and I'm just going to let you know right now, I know you don't want 4 pages to read, so this is probably going to be faster and easier for me to convey verbally. But just know, my paper was very, very articulate and very detailed. So yesterday morning, I showed up to Mrs. Thornburg's TK class right as the bell was ringing, and I got in there, and I got in there as students were starting to come in. I noticed that all of the furniture, except for a few pieces of furniture, were child-sized. There were a ton of bright colors everywhere. There were 4 tables, 4 long tables, and they were mashed together, and 8 students were sitting around one set of tables, or there was 8 chairs around one, and then another 2 sets of tables, again in the same fashion, with 7 more chairs. There was a total of 15 students in her class. There were posters hanging up on the ceiling across, or not on the ceiling, but on the wall closest to the ceiling with the alphabet, but there was only 7 out of the 27 letters exposed. There were some drawings that correlated with each letter, and I later on found out that there was only 7 exposed because those were the 7 letters that the students had learned about this year so far. There was an area of books, and then partitioned, and a partition, like a short partition, and then a dollhouse and a kitchen play area right next to that. There was a place for books for bags and coats, and then in the back part of the room there was a restroom for students and a bigger table. It was almost like those 4 tables were mashed together, and there was a larger table, large enough for all 15 students to sit around, and it had appeared like the chairs that were there were like those wobbly chairs at that table, and from what I saw, that table was for eating at. There was a sink area in the room, and in various parts of the room there were blocks of different sizes and materials for kids to play with, but it didn't look like anything was locked up. Anyway, as the morning started and as I got in there, I noticed at each table place there was a white sheet of paper, and crayons were on the desks. As students came in, I noticed they put their stuff away, and they were so excited to see Mrs. Thornburg. Each student was like socializing, and they were hanging out, and they were like, Mrs. Thornburg, Mrs. Thornburg, or actually they were saying, teacher, 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 look at what I have, look at what I have. And it was so exciting. Some kids were screaming, and right off the bat, the screaming was received pleasantly by the teacher, and she gently said, we're not screaming today. And they didn't calm down, but she wasn't fazed. Although there were some parents that were coming into the classroom as well, she was walking around the classroom and socializing, saying, greeting everybody, greeting the children, greeting parents. She was just really just kind of walking around as the kids were trailing behind her to show her this and that. She would, she was looking and she was acknowledging very kindly. She just really connected with her students, which I really loved. Anyway, there was music playing, and some of the songs I noticed were in English and some were in Spanish. About half of the class were I noticed were Spanish-speaking students. So they were either from Mexico or Central America, but maybe not directly, but their parents or their grandparents, they came from Spanish-speaking households. And she, Mrs. Thornburg, a native English speaker, was speaking with parents in Spanish, so she was obviously bilingual to some extent. A lot of the stuff in her classroom was bilingual, but this is not a bilingual class. Right? The bilingual school is Madison. Little Mountain is not technically a bilingual school, but she definitely put that out there that she had the capability to be culturally sensitive and wanted to connect with her students and her families, and she made it available by speaking Spanish, which was cool. So there was an obvious theme in the decor that I noticed, and it was kind of like an under the sea marine life, which I noticed right off the bat. There was pictures, there was posters, there was not toys but just decor, and so the picture that the kids were prompted to draw when they first arrived was of a crab. So like I said, there's those white sheets of paper on the table with the crayons, and I noticed each kid that came in put their stuff away. They either socialized or they went straight to their table, to their desk spot, and they just started drawing. They were really excited, and they just started drawing. It was a crab. Now, some of the students that weren't really getting the prompt to come in and put their stuff away and sit down were very gently and not obviously kind of corralled by the teacher, by Mrs. Thornburg. And what she would do, there's like a herd of kids behind her, and what she had done, I noticed at some point when time was almost up, to draw this picture, right? Like that first 15 minutes of like settle in time, she just turned her body and was like acknowledging the students, and kind of like almost with her hands, right, and her body, she was kind of walking them, inching her way towards each student's seat. And she just, without saying anything, she's just listening to them pull their seat out, and they just sat right down and started working on their drawing. Some of the students that kind of evaded her tactics, she went over to them directly and asked them, where are you going to sit, my friend? That's right. She said, where are you going to sit, my friend? And then they would sit down, which I thought was great. She gave them a choice of where they wanted to sit, so it didn't sound like they had like specific seating, like a seating chart or a seating arrangement. And then some of the students she noticed had started, they weren't drawing yet. They were trying, they were just sitting there at their desk socializing. She prompted them by offering them a choice to kind of help them get started. And she said, oh, what colors are you going to use to draw your crab? And then she said to another student, is your crab going to be in the water or on the beach? And so she just assumed that they knew what they were supposed to be doing, I think, because, it's 3/4 of the way through the year, and I'm sure they've done this every day where they've come into some kind of settle-in routine of drawing a picture, because a lot of students just got it and just knew what they were supposed to do. Anyhow, as the students would finish their drawings, they handed their drawings into her, and then got to do choice time, which it seemed like they got to just choose what they did to play. And so for the next 15 minutes until 9:30, they got to play. Some of the kids played with blocks, like the big cardboard blocks that look like bricks. Some of the kids played with smaller blocks and stacked them into towers. Some of the students just kept coloring. So they just asked for another piece of paper and they drew an additional picture, or they colored an additional picture. And some students were playing with the dollhouse, and some students were just running around screaming, which didn't bother anybody, which I thought was really cool, because I did not grow up that way. What I had noticed, though, was that she was really helping them with their executive functioning skills by offering them, the ability to choose and to discern. It was kind of a child-led playtime, which I thought was really cool. And there were some students that you could tell they were a little grumpier than others, and they weren't ready to get along with everybody yet, and so they were struggling to get along. And she actually, her para came over at one point to a couple of students that were arguing about blocks that were pretty upset with each other, and she herself said to them, can we stop, put the blocks down, can you tell me what's happening? And then she said, put your finger on your nose if you know what's happening right now. And so they did. And they were just really, they just seemed very mature about the way that they had handled it. And Mrs. West seemed like she really knew her students well enough to approach that situation the way that she did, because not all kids would have responded that way, and I know that from having my own. Anyway, so during the first 15 minutes, while the kids were drawing and playing, or first half an hour, I noticed that 3 parents stayed back and really helped to support their kids during this time. And Mrs. Thornburg didn't say anything. She didn't ask them to leave. There was no expectation. I'm sure they could actually have stayed longer, and they didn't. She even had like an impromptu conference with one of the parents, and during this time as well, Mrs. West was providing a snack for another student, and it was just the fact that she was really cool with the parents being there to support the students, and they weren't just supporting their own, they were supporting some of the other students and helping them to get along. I appreciated the way that Mrs. Thornburg was very accepting, and almost appreciated, she was really grateful that they had stayed as long as they did, and the parents were just, you could see that it brought them a lot of joy to have that privilege to be able to stay and know that their child was being taken care of. So a bell rang at this point, and all the students were asked to clean up and meet on the carpet. And so for the next 10 minutes was circle time. Mrs. Thornburg, without talking, she had told the students, okay, the bell rang, it's time to clean up, and I'll meet you at circle time. And so as most of the students made their way to the circle, to the carpet on the floor, they had like colored circles, right, going around the carpet. Each student had a spot that they chose to sit in, so each student sat in a little circle. Without speaking, Mrs. Thornburg went to her seat on the outer edge of the circle and started showing the crab drawings, and students cheered each time they saw a crab drawing and laughed, and then Miss Thornburg transitioned and said, hands in lap, and all of the students, it seemed like simultaneously, except for a couple students, went from cheering and being crazy and excited to doing this. And she followed that hands in lap command with a self-regulation song, and it ended with, this is how we listen in group time, which I thought was great. And so she had acknowledged that a couple of students were holding stuff in their hands, and she said, she had relayed consequences. I'm going to have to take that away if I notice that those things in your hands are being distracting. But she didn't take them right away. And then she had explained why. And she said, I'm going to have to take them away if they become a distraction, because we need to be good listeners in order to learn. And sometimes it's hard to listen when we have stuff in our hands. And so after a few minutes of story time, there was a couple of distractions with the kids holding the toys. And so she got up and she asked for them, and they handed them over, not a problem. So during the time, the class reviewed what to expect for the day. So the lesson plan on the Salish Sea and the animals and creatures that lived in it. They went over the morning message of who's coming to the classroom to teach them something new, and it happened to be a nutritionist that was going to teach them about whole foods. And the kids got really excited. They wanted to learn about fruits and vegetables. I thought it was great. They spoke about the giant octopus, which was the featured animal, hence the under the sea theme decor. I was following what was going on. And then going to the letter G, correlating to the giant octopus, right? The students sang a song about the Salish Sea, which I thought was really cool. And they sang it from a video that was on the projector screen. They used some like clapping hand motions, and then they sang a song a cappella, which used some more hand motions, and one of them was like this for like a sea otter. I thought it was really cute. Anyway, that's gonna come into play later, because just shortly after that part of circle time, Mrs. Thornburg sat down on the carpet and read a book called Under the Sea to the students. And every page that she read, she paused. She, asked the kids questions about the pictures, and she actually gave even more insight. She gave more information about the things on the pictures. She integrated mathematics by talking about how they could build a chart with all the facts that they have, like all the creatures' features and what they eat. And as she's asking questions, students are like yelling out the answers, right? So as she's asking questions about the things on the pages, students are just yelling out the answers. And she touched her nose, and she said, and as students are, yelling, she stops reading, stops asking questions, and she touches her nose, and she says, "We're not gonna blurt." And she whispers, "We're not gonna blurt. We're not gonna blurt." And she says it repeatedly until all the students calm down, right? And it was like this cue that they knew. So she asked another question, and instead of yelling like they were doing, yelling the answers, the kids that had answers for those questions just went like this, and put their finger on their nose. And then she called on the students who were following the expectations. And she kept, throughout this time, she kept giving praise to students who were following expectations. So, it wasn't going unnoticed. She wouldn't just talk to the students that weren't following expectations, but she was giving praise as well to the students that were, and she was doing it aloud so the other students could recognize what expectations were. After the story was done, Mrs. Thornburg, this is my favorite part, she put on the projector a we wish you well page with it's like a big red heart, and every student's name was on the outside along with the teachers, and they went through each student's name, and they said, "Good morning, so-and-so," and then that student said, "Good morning, friends." And if somebody wasn't there for the day, then she would drag the name on the projector into the big red heart, and she would say, we're going to put Jane in our hearts today. And everybody say, "Jane, you're in my heart." And at the end, the students got a chance to share who they wanted to be in their heart that, today or yesterday. And then they sang like a little ditty about, about who was in their heart. And I just thought that was so cute. It was just so collective, it was just a collectivist move. It was very uplifting. It was, it was so caring and helpful and kind and loving. So at that point, the students got up and they got their wiggles out and they did the Pledge of Allegiance and went over school expectations. And because the students were so wiggly and it wasn't time for recess yet, the teacher pivoted and played another song called The Slippery Fish, hence the Under the Sea theme. And then the students got to sing out loud and interact, and they got their wiggles out, and then they sat back down for calendar time, and they counted the days of the month and spoke about what to expect for the next day. And then Mrs. Thornburg loaded a book onto the projector screen, a bunch of slides, and she gave praise to students who continued to follow expectations. She read the book, spoke about the pictures a little bit, asking more questions. She gently reminded students of school expectations again, as needed. And as she was asking questions about the pictures in the book, or she was reading stuff from the book, she said, "What enemies do you think the octopus has?" And then she did this. That same hand motion from that song earlier. And one of the students immediately shouts out, "Sea otters," because that hand motion meant sea otters. She was jogging their working memory, and I thought it was so amazing how she did that. She took something from a song earlier, and she helped activate, I don't know if activate is the right word, activate their working memory by using it again later on in the day. And I was impressed. And then she even checked in with the students at this point and was like, "Hey, are you guys, we've learned a lot so far. How are you guys feeling? Are you ready for another slide?" And the students were so engaged at this point, learning about what she was teaching and the way that she was teaching it, that, and they were chill, right? And they were like, "Yeah, we want to learn more." And so she kept going, and she was like, how many brains does the octopus have? Can anyone remember? And I think at this point it was, she was wrapping up, and she was wrapping up the book, and she was doing a recall of what they had just learned from those slides. How many brains does the octopus have? Can you tell me what you learned so far about the octopus? And one of the kids was like, "They have suction cups," and then it was 10:15, and it was time for recess. So everybody got up from circle, and they just instinctively knew it was time for recess. They got their coats or sweaters, and as soon as they started seeing that Mrs. Thornburg was by the front door, they just gravitated and got into line, and they went outside. So I felt like Mrs. Thornburg promoted like a structured playtime by setting out those paper and those coloring crayons. I felt like she did a really good job of reinforcing that they were self-regulating, or that they needed to remember about self-regulation and expectations. I loved how gentle she was. I also felt like she did a great job of helping their working memory, like we spoke about. I loved how she used like the clapping during singing songs, and gosh, there was so much. She really did a great job, like with like just initiating play, even through story time. She just let the kids be playful, because I think she just knew that's what they needed. She came across to me as having a more collectivist ideology, in the way that she set up her room. One, everybody was like in a circle all the time, a circle around the table, or a circle at story time, or a circle at the lunch, the snack table. It was always in a circle, and to me that like boasts like togetherness. And then she just understood her students and their families' needs, and she, as a native English speaker, she tried really hard to integrate Spanish, because half of her students spoke Spanish at home. And she just was gentle and kind and patient. And this video was definitely like a 4-page written paper, and I'm really sorry, and I hope this is not too cumbersome, and I apologize. I was so impressed with how everything went in her classroom, and I just really appreciated the assignment. There was just a lot that happened in an hour and a half, and I don't know, there was small furniture, bright colors, coat and bag organizer, book area, pretend play area, sink area, bathrooms, alphabets, maps. There was, the theme was adhered to. She just kept reworking their memory by, having theme decor, and then at each group setting, there wasn't a whole lot of one-on-one settings, but in each group setting, she brought up something that correlated to the theme. So anyway, I'm going to be done chatting. I hope you know how much I appreciated this assignment, and I feel like I learned a ton. So let me know if you have questions or concerns, or if there's something that I didn't articulate on that you were expecting from me. I think I hit everything in the rubric. All right, take care.